Anna had always lived a quiet life in the suburbs of Manchester. At 38, newly divorced and somewhat emotionally drained, she was focused on her work-from-home graphic design job and raising her teenage daughter. Her days were uneventful, routine, predictable, and quiet. It had been nearly a year since her divorce, and while her friends encouraged her to get out there again, she wasn't interested. She wasn't bitter, just tired. Her heart wasn't looking for love, it was looking for peace. One rainy Thursday afternoon, she opened the door to collect her weekly grocery delivery. Standing there, slightly wet from the drizzle, was a young man who couldn't have been more than 22. He greeted her with a polite smile and passed her the bags one by one, careful not to let the rain seep in. He was clean-shaven, had warm eyes, and spoke with a calm tone that somehow made her pause. His name tag read Jamie. As she turned to go back inside, her old wooden garden gate made a screeching sound and slipped off its hinge. Without waiting for her to say anything, Jamie dropped his delivery clipboard and offered to help. She hesitated at first. This wasn't part of his job, but he insisted. Within a few minutes, he had the gate propped up again, temporarily fixed with a clever tie using a plastic bag from the groceries. She chuckled. He laughed too. It was the first genuine laugh she'd had with someone in months. She thanked him, and he just nodded, saying, "It's no trouble at all." Something about the way he said it stuck with her. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't performative. It was real. Over the next few weeks, she started seeing him more often. Jamie seemed to be delivering in her area more frequently. At first, she thought it was coincidence. But he later admitted he had requested shifts in her neighborhood. When she asked why, he shrugged and said, "You're nice to talk to." They chatted briefly during each delivery. Books, music, food. Nothing deep, nothing personal. But in those small windows of conversation, she found herself smiling more. He always carried himself with a surprising calmness. Not overly confident, but composed. It wasn't the charm of a younger man trying to impress. It was the ease of someone who simply enjoyed being present. She told herself it was just a bit of harmless friendship. Maybe even loneliness. After all, he was years younger. A student, probably just looking to pass time between shifts. But part of her looked forward to those 5-minute chats. Part of her watched the clock when the day came for groceries. One day, he asked about the plants she kept by the window. That turned into a conversation about her favorite hiking spots. Then, out of the blue, he texted her a photo of a trail he had tried based on her recommendation. She smiled and typed back, "Looks peaceful." She didn't know it then, but that was the moment something shifted. Quietly, gently, without announcement. Jamie's texts became more frequent, but never intrusive. They were thoughtful, an article he thought she'd like, a song he discovered, or just a simple, "Hope your day's going well." Anna, initially unsure, began replying with equal interest. It surprised her how easily conversation flowed between them. There was no effort, no pretending. Just two people talking, sharing, and listening. He started opening up more. One afternoon, he mentioned his mother had passed away when he was 13. That detail stayed with her. It explained his maturity, the calmness that didn't quite match his age. She responded not with pity, but understanding. She told him how losing people doesn't always mean death, how her divorce had felt like mourning someone who is still alive. He read her message, then replied simply, "That makes sense." Over time, their connection deepened in the quietest ways. He sent her voice notes of him playing acoustic guitar. She told him which songs made her cry and why. They laughed over silly memes and vented about life's small frustrations. Anna didn't see it happening, but she began saving his messages. Not deliberately, just instinctively. It felt like she was collecting moments of something real, something she hadn't experienced in a long time. One evening, while replying to his message, she caught herself smiling. Not just a polite smile, a soft, unconscious smile that lingered long after the screen turned off. She closed her eyes and asked herself what this was. It didn't feel like a crush. It didn't feel reckless. It felt grounding, like she was seen, heard, and valued. There was no big moment, no declaration, just a slow unfolding of comfort. He began walking her through new recipes over the phone, and she'd share photos of the results. They started recommending books to each other, even watching the same shows at the same time and texting thoughts afterward. There was an ease between them, like they had skipped the awkward parts of getting to know someone and jumped straight into familiarity. One day, Jamie told her he had deferred a year of university after his mom passed. He said it took him time to find direction, but working part-time had helped him feel useful again. She admired that. She told him so. He said she reminded him of peace, something he hadn't felt since childhood. She didn't know how to respond, so she just said thank you. But it stayed with her, echoing long after the conversation ended. The age gap lingered in the back of her mind like a quiet reminder, but it never overshadowed the connection itself. What they shared didn't feel forced or inappropriate. It felt like two people recognizing something rare in each other. Something kind. Something human. Still, Anna kept her guard up. She didn't want to misread kindness as interest. But with each passing day, that line blurred a little more. And even though they hadn't spoken about feelings, both knew this wasn't just casual conversation anymore. Something deeper was unfolding, patient, respectful, and undeniably real. Jamie was the first to say it, not with grand gestures or dramatic build-up, but in the middle of a quiet chat about nothing in particular. "I think I'm falling for you," he typed. The message sat on her screen, glowing, still. Anna stared at it longer than she expected. Her heart didn't race. It sank, not with dread but with weight. This wasn't a joke. It wasn't casual. It was real. And she had to decide what to do with it. She waited hours before replying. Not out of cruelty, but because she didn't know how to put her feelings into words. When she finally responded, it was honest. She told him the truth, that she cared about him deeply, but she didn't know if it could or should go further. She mentioned the age difference, the complications, the things people would say. Jamie read it all, then simply replied, "I understand. Take your time." The next few days were quiet. No texts. No calls. Anna felt his absence, like a missing heartbeat. She realized how much space he had taken in her daily life, and how empty things felt without his presence. Her mind wandered constantly, replaying moments, reading old messages, second-guessing herself. She wasn't worried about what others thought. She was worried about whether she was being honest with herself. One night, she looked through a drawer filled with photos from her past. Her wedding, holidays, her daughter's birthdays. Memories of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. She wasn't the same woman anymore. That version of her had compromised, sacrificed, and settled. But with Jamie, she hadn't done any of that. She had just been. And he had accepted her exactly as she was. She thought about the way he listened, how he remembered details, how he never pushed, never rushed. She thought about how rare it was to feel safe with someone, especially someone who didn't owe her anything. He hadn't tried to fix her. He had just shown up, consistently and quietly, until she realized she wasn't lonely anymore. After a week of silence, she sent him a voice note. Her words were steady, but her voice trembled. She told him she didn't know where this would go, but she knew it was real. She told him she wasn't ready for labels or promises, but she wanted to see where their connection could lead. He responded almost immediately. "That's all I hoped for," he said. They agreed to take things slow. No pressure. Just honesty. Jamie didn't brag about her response or act triumphant. He was grateful, respectful, still the same patient, steady presence he'd always been. They set boundaries. They talked openly about what they were comfortable with, what they were scared of, what they hoped for. It wasn't a traditional love story. It didn't follow a template, but it was theirs, and it was enough. Anna didn't call it love yet. Not out loud. But something had changed. It was no longer a question of if, but when. Months passed, and their connection only grew stronger. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, dependable, and filled with small, significant moments. They didn't rush to define what they were. There was no need. They knew what it meant by how they treated each other, how they showed up without being asked, how they listened without needing to fix anything. It wasn't the kind of love either of them expected, but it was the kind they both needed. Anna noticed how her days felt lighter. There was a peace she hadn't felt in years, not because life was suddenly perfect, but because she no longer carried everything alone. Jamie had become part of her everyday rhythm, not demanding space, but naturally taking it. He was still studying, still working part-time, but he made time for her. Not out of obligation, but choice. That meant more than grand gestures ever could. They met each other's friends slowly. Reactions varied. Some were curious, some skeptical, a few judgmental. But they didn't owe anyone an explanation. Anna didn't feel the need to defend her happiness, and Jamie never wavered. He wasn't chasing a fantasy or rebelling against norms. He had simply found someone he connected with deeply and chose to hold on to that. There were challenges, disagreements, moments of doubt, days when their age difference showed up in unexpected ways. But they talked through them. Not perfectly, but sincerely. Anna admired how Jamie handled conflict. Never defensive, always open. He admitted when he didn't understand her perspective, then tried to. She did the same. They gave each other room to grow. Anna's daughter, at first cautious, began to accept Jamie in her own time. He never overstepped. He didn't try to take on a role he hadn't earned. He was just kind, consistent, and respectful. That mattered more than anything else. Trust wasn't asked for, it was built. Love, when it finally found its name between them, didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived in ordinary moments, a shared meal, a late-night call, a quiet walk. Jamie told her he loved her one morning after they talked about fears and futures. Anna didn't hesitate. She said it back with calm certainty. It didn't feel rushed. It felt earned. They didn't plan their future in rigid detail. They knew life would shift and change. But they also knew that what they had wasn't fragile. It had grown from honesty, from showing up day after day when nothing was guaranteed. They had built something real without needing to explain it to the world. Anna often thought about how unexpected it all was. If someone had told her a year ago that she'd find love again, in a place with a person, in a way she never imagined, she wouldn't have believed it. But here it was. Steady, grounding, and real. She no longer felt the need to justify her joy. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't conventional. But it was hers. And that was more than enough.